Well, this is where I have to hype it up a little bit, because this is our first Make Your Mark Notes on Music Education live podcast recording. Woo! Hey, let's hope that gets captured on the ambient on the recording. So yes, this is a podcast, if you're not familiar with it, that showcases diverse experiences and perspectives from across the music education sector.
We've rounded up some fantastic guest speakers today to discuss engaging primary pupils with ambitious music making. From opera to electronic music making and plenty in between, there's lots to learn from their innovative projects.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Normans, for a little reveal that you may have shortly. So, without further ado, I'd like to go down the line and introduce our podcast guests. Let's start off here.
Okay, hello, I'm David. I'm the Chief Executive of Merton Music Foundation. We're an independent charity music service in South West London. And we're in the third year of delivering a program called Mini Musicians, which is something we set up in response to local need. Schools were telling us about pupils, particularly in the early years of the school, coming in with low levels of school readiness. And we have in our borough a real inequity of access to instrumental learning between the east and the west of the borough. So Mini Musicians attempted to address that through teaching in 10 primary and special schools, full day of specialist provision in early years and Key Stage 1. And we centred it all around a brand new scheme of learning that we wrote based on the Sounds of Intent framework. And there were themes of oracy, small steps learning, and we were often delivering in half-class groups with some dedicated one-to-one catch-up and intervention time as part of the timetable.
Sorry, I felt really rude doing that, but we did warn you. Moving on, I'm sure we'll hear more in a moment anyway.
I can't wait to hear more. Hi, my name's Rachel Hawker. I'm the Director of Education at Rocksteady Music School. I've been with Rocksteady for about 10 years now. I think we were teaching about 1,000 children a week when I first joined, and we're now teaching over 100,000 primary school children a week how to play an instrument in a band. I've also worked for West Sussex Music Service for a very long time before coming to Rocksteady, so I've got a real passion for making music as engaging as possible and have spent my kind of career dedicated to that. At Rocksteady, it's been all about progressive and inclusive education that gets kids excited about making music in a slightly different way. So yeah, I'm just really excited to talk about that today, and I think I'm under a minute, so I don't need the instrument.
Wow, yeah.
You're well under a minute. That's not fair. You're depriving us of the joy of another novelty instrument.
Do it anyway. I got done.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Caro C. I'm an electronic music artist, and I am the founder, instigator and director of Delia Derbyshire Day. We're a small electronic music charity based in Manchester, and really, our guiding light, our impact is all about elevating the legacy of Delia Derbyshire as a catalyst for empowerment now. So empowerment in music, empowerment in technology, empowerment in creativity and heritage. So for us, it's about helping as many children as possible to get to arrive in high school with competence and confidence in electronic music. And we've just, basically today, I'm talking about our new report, which is an electronic music education needs analysis that we've just completed, which was in consultation with teachers and students. So hopefully we'll unpack that a bit.
Wow, with 10 seconds to spare.
Hi, I'm Bridget Rennie. I'm Executive Director of Mahogany Opera. We are a leading commissioner and producer of new music theatre and opera. And one of our main programs is called Snappy Operas, which is a participatory program of opera making in primary schools. So we've been running that since 2016 in schools across the country and recently internationally as well, working often with music hubs in England. Over the last 9 years, we've delivered, I think, around about 150 projects working with 5,000 children. And we've commissioned 15 composer-writer teams to go into schools and create these 10-minute snappy operas, which are then staged and performed by young people. The beauty of snappy operas is it's a really fun, accessible way to introduce opera and new music to primary school children. And each piece is for groups of characters. There's no solos or divas. There's just groups of kids being birds or sausages or knits. And you'll hear more in a minute.
Thank you, everyone. It is a really hard task for the pair of us to cut you off because you're all saying such fantastic stuff. But of course, across the conference, we're talking about all things ambition and quality. So let's dive straight in. We'd like to know from each of you, what does quality in music education mean to you? So, Rachel, do you fancy kicking us off?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to reflect on that over the past couple of days, and there's been lots of discussion about the quality of the experience versus the quality of the outcome, and actually both being so important. And I think where I've landed is if you focus on the quality of the experience, the quality of the outcome will follow. But what does that mean? What does a quality experience look like? And I think the key word for me is engagement. You could teach the most technically perfect music lesson, but if the kid's not walking away excited about what they've just learned, has a truly engaging experience happened for them? So I think one of the things we talk about a lot at Rocksteady is this concept of inspire first, teach second. And that's not to devalue the teaching element in any way, it's just to put the right emphasis on the inspiration aspect. If kids are leaving the room really inspired and truly engaged, then you're more likely to have embedded the learning, and you're more likely to have excited them about a kind of music-filled life. So I think that's been really key. The other two central pillars that we talk a lot about in our lessons are the concept of fun and progress. And I've spoken a lot about this with our teachers. We've got over 600 teachers across the country now, so I have repeated myself a few times on this. But, if a child's not having fun, they're not going to make as much progress. I genuinely believe that. But if they're not making progress and they're not being, challenged enough, then eventually the fun stops. So the two absolutely have to coexist for kind of meaningful musical experiences to happen. And we teach kids how to play in a rock band, right? So we've sort of been lucky that the fun is there. You're in a band, you're getting to play music with your friends and colleagues in your class. So we've had to work on the progress side and making sure that Rocksteady looks the same in Plymouth as it does in Newcastle. And I think for me, the commitment to quality is so important, and it's about knowing what you don't know. It's about going out and talking to the critics, the people who are, talking to you about what you still could do better as an organisation, and the parents and the kids, and kind of constantly committed to that continuous improvement cycle. And that's where we've invested a lot of our time over the years, and I sort of see that as my responsibility. I sit on the board of directors for Rocksteady, and I see my role specifically as representing the experience of the child, but also with the accountability of setting up those teachers with the right sets of tools to deliver that quality experience. So, I've gone on a bit of a ramble there, but I think ultimately if I circle back to what I think quality is, I think it's about the quality of the engagement that you're creating with the children. Are they walking out of a lesson inspired and wanting to come back and learn more about music? Because that's when you know you're onto a winner.
Absolutely, thank you. I mean, I'm sure all of us sat here can remember that at least one inspirational, fun, engaging teacher that's made all that difference along the journey. Does that resonate for anyone else on the panel? Does anyone else have any different ideas of what quality means to them? Jump in.
What Rachel said really resonates with me, and obviously a lot of those buzzwords that we use around quality of experience and quality of engagement, but I'd like to add a third, which is quality of expression, which is something we talk a lot about with our Snappy programme. So it's not about the quality of the final performance as such, but about how we're enabling young people to express themselves, use their natural singing voices, but also obviously with opera you have all the other art forms, so movement, acting, making, and all of those being opportunities for sort of real creative expression, and that being the focus rather than the kind of product at the end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting here, we've got people who are dealing with genres across the spectrum, and hearing your answers, I'm just wondering if you think that quality looks different for different genres, or if there should be kind of a holistic response to music and how it should be judged, and the musical return that you're getting from young people and the quality of education. Caro?
Yeah, I suppose I can't help, it's not a cop-out, but it is a mixed model, isn't it? And I think a lot of what you're saying is resonating, and I'm trying to think in terms of our perspective and approach. So we teach a lot of composition, which from the needs analysis report, a lot of teachers struggle with to try and make that work at primary level at the same time as the kids really don't struggle at all once we've shown them the basics of how to start to record and create their own samples, create their own beats, get the building blocks, I think we kind of trust them to decide the quality, because most kids are hearing electronic music all around them anyway, in some form or other, but they're also hearing music, I think, especially film, movies. You've got a lot of classical music, for example. So in that sense, I think we trust them to tell us whether they think it's on their terms, whether it's quality. And also in terms of that, definitely the play. And I think, what do we want them to come out with at the end of primary school, which is why the only kind of baselines we can, pardon the audio pun, we can come up with are that confidence and competence. Because if they are arriving at high school already feeling confident enough to record themselves, for example, they can go on and hopefully feel confident to explore any genres.
That's really interesting. I mean, we've got rock, opera, and kind of everything, jazz focus here. Do you feel like people come in with an idea of a certain level, a certain expectation of what quality is with those genres?
I think going too far down the genre route is probably a bit of a red herring. So with the Mini Musicians program, we were looking at the start of the school journey. When I think about quality in primary, I think about a culture of music making across the school, and I think it's really important that does start right from the early years, from the first point of access that children have. So in the program that we put together, we set out principles or values that we worked from. So sound first was a really important one for us. We did interrogate musical notation, and we did kind of explore different genres and different things, but it all started from sound for the young people, and that was a really important part of the project. We also had this concept of maximizing value, and this was a really interesting thing that came out of the Mini Musicians program. And we've got this massive research study. We've done 300 children, over 1,000 assessments, 20, 30-minute individual assessments that we filmed. And part of the maximizing value principle was that we used a fixed DO approach. So some of the songs the children learned, they always learned in the same key. And what we found in the responses when they were prompted is that they start singing back in that key in the tone. So there's so much that they can pick up at such a young age that we wouldn't necessarily realize that potential is there. So starting early, I think, is really important. And then as that runs through the school, after 1, 2, 3 years, suddenly those children have come up, and you've got the next group and the next group, and that's where that culture and that quality in the school is built. The last thing I just want to touch on that is it's a value of MMF, but it was also a principle of the project, the Mini Musicians project, joy in music making. And I think when we're working with young people, when we're working with children, when we're teaching them music, we can be thinking, oh, they need to learn this genre, or they need to learn that theory or that note, but actually, do they experience a moment of joy that ignites them with music? Because that's what's going to then lead to progression later on and these next steps.
There's a lot of nodding heads there. Is that the same agreement? Is that kind of the first principle for everyone here?
I think that's it, isn't it? It's about getting the kids hands-on, making music, learning that it's a safe space to do so. And then you can build the technique from there. If that first experience is a little bit scary or failing feels like an option, you could run the risk of losing a child's engagement really early on. So I think getting them in, hands-on, enjoying music making, and then building on the technical aspects afterwards, I think is really, really important.
Thank you. Oh, go on.
Sorry,
go on.
and joy, it's joy and imagination as well, isn't it? Because, in terms of the paradigm we're all operating in, joy is a radical act, and so is imagination. So I think, and ultimately, we only, like you said, we only get up in the morning and do this job because of the magic of music.
So you've already touched on some of this already, some fantastic stuff. With all that in mind, what do you think needs a refresh? Are there any ways we might think about perhaps redefining quality in music education? Bridget, do you want to start us off? Sorry, big question.
You didn't warn me about that one. I mean, we come in with a program that is in majority led by specialists, so artists coming into school to lead Snappy Opera workshops. But a big part of that, a Snappy Opera project in a school, is also CPD with the teachers, and trying to build a legacy so that when we go, there is that increased confidence in using creativity in the classroom with their young people. I think there's obviously this I think is there a question about to come up about sort of specialists versus non-specialists, so I don't want to anticipate that too much, but I think that balance is sort of, you need both, I think. And I think teachers are under so much pressure now, and I think that just creating the space in the classroom, I don't have all the answers to this, and I know there's a curriculum review sort of ongoing, but it does feel like anything that could be done to just give teachers more support, resources, training, to enable them to kind of enable music making and confident creativity in their classrooms, that for me that's an area that could benefit from refreshing. And I think it's just absolutely about that holistic approach and making an inclusive space where people, and I think we're all doing this kind of work in different genres for people to be able to make music.
Yeah, I think that there's a real opportunity, isn't there? Because there's a lot of support out there for what to teach, but there's not a lot of support for non-specialists on how to teach music in a really engaging way. And that's where I think there's a real opportunity for specialists to come in and deliver, but equally to try and upskill and get that culture of music kind of running through the entire school. That's where you see, those really magic moments is where the whole school is excited about it. I mean, we get to sit in Rocksteady concerts, and every single concert you'll see one kid who brings their mum's leather jacket and it's like massive for them, and then they bring their dad's aviators and they're like 4 years old getting up and playing a bass guitar looking like Suzi Quatro. But really the magic moment is the whole school getting excited about that, and the whole school getting excited about music, and actually it not just being about that specific genre of music. It's just, hey, music's pretty cool. Making music is looking a little bit more accessible to me. So I think that's the really exciting part of this. And I think, it's really hard to define something like quality, but I think actually the definition should be a continuous improvement cycle. What are you constantly doing? What are you learning from? Where are your mistakes? Get into the gnarly stuff. What's going wrong? I spend most of my time now talking about all the things that Rocksteady are doing wrong, because ultimately that's the commitment to trying to do better and listening to where we could improve and support our teachers better to continue to deliver an amazing experience for the kids. And I think that commitment to quality is about just that. You never know everything, and learning from other genres, other delivery models, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's interesting to hear you say that regardless of the genre, like if the music making is engaging, it's having the outcome that you want, it's having that impact. And I wonder for you, Caro, with Delia Derbyshire Day, obviously you're going in with electronic music making, one would think quite different from running a rock band, but are you seeing similar things?
I think we're seeing a mismatch between the music that children are listening to and the music they're being taught, which I think is quite accepted now. I know it's no one's fault apart from the curriculum, which obviously not one person can change that. So Refresh involves quite a big systemic stuff for us. But, that's more my opinion, really. But I think it is that thing of how do you keep it culturally relevant? How do you keep updating this big beast of the curriculum? How do you keep it inclusive? How do you keep it representative? How do you keep it diverse? How do you keep it alive, really, when teachers and everyone is struggling to just make the ends meet in the classroom kind of thing? So, for example, with a trauma-informed approach, then, I remember we had some extra training last week from Thrive and saying to them, it's kind of shame that we only dip in. And they said, no, actually, you're giving every child a complete refresh. You're giving every teacher a complete refresh because you don't know all about these children and what the limitations that are either perceived or real for them. You're coming in and knowing they've all got the potential gives them that opportunity.
I suppose this is going to a really key point into our next question, which is that trauma-informed response, going back to your points about joy and the importance of joy in music, particularly at primary, and the curriculum as well, looking at whether you need a more holistic approach to music, or there should be this focus at getting better musicians, et cetera, at primary school. Do you need a holistic approach or a progression approach, or can you have both? And I'm going to start off with Bridget there. All the big questions starting with you, sorry.
I mean, I think for me and our approach at Snappies is that the holistic approach comes first. You want to create a safe, inclusive space where everyone feels able to participate. And, it's exactly what Rachel's already said, there's no progression without inclusion, and that inclusion comes from a holistic approach. I think, the music has to be fun and inclusive, and then progress might happen. But I think, progress isn't a word that we use particularly. I don't think it's hugely useful in a primary setting. Maybe that's a bit of a controversial thing to say. But I think we are absolutely, our approach is play-based. It's about fun and joy, like at the risk of repeating ourselves. So that's my take on that question.
Amazing. David?
Yeah, one is dependent on the other. If you teach the whole child, if you teach all music to that child in that kind of spiraling, building a continuous way, then that's when you're going to get real meaningful progress. You're not going to get prolonged progress without that. But what's really important, what we learned from the Mini Musicians program is starting that as early as possible in a really considered and planned out way. So the scheme of learning that we wrote, like I say, was built on the sounds of intent. And we knew that for the cohort that we were starting in year one, it was a 5-term project. The cohort we were starting in year one, we knew that we wanted them to learn the melodica in year 2. So with that ambition in mind, we started with activities to scaffold towards that. So we started on the chime bars. We used chime bars with color coding. We moved on to glockenspiels, color-coded and then not color-coded, just normal. And then from the glockenspiels, as they get to year 2, they progress on to the melodica. So that learning journey starts right from the beginning. But all the while, we're singing, we're clapping, we're doing musical games, we're doing fun finishes. There's all these different aspects of the lesson that are happening to teach holistically, but with a longer-term view of progression.
So and this goes to everyone, with your whole class, whole group settings, if you have someone at primary who seems to be particularly excelling, how do you kind of foster that talent whilst also making sure that the rest of the group are firstly experiencing joy, but also having the chance to progress as well?
Yeah, I guess one of the ways we try to approach that is by using GarageBand on iPads, and most primary schools do have that. And then it will be a case of once we're finished, if you like, or once we're leaving, can they carry on a school club, an after-school club, a lunchtime club, or they go on to teach others, so the kids will become ambassadors or champions in the school. And of course, then there's now Taranga have their U Studio software, and we will signpost people to other software, whether it's Audacity or BandLab or SoundLab or things that are available online. So therefore, they can actually, and that's how you progress. That's how we've become professional electronic musicians. Is that all you need is a pair of headphones, because it means you're not disturbing any family members or parents who don't want to listen to you being out of tune for 2 years. You're not, you just get in your bubble and you can have that agency, autonomy to decide your sound. Ideally, that's how new genres can be created as well.
Yes, it's a challenge that we've faced, teaching 9 kids on 5 different instruments all at the same time, and they're all coming in at slightly different levels and abilities. One of the things that we've developed is kind of tailored arrangements, so you could be teaching a band where you've got somebody working at a grade 2 level, but you've also got somebody working at an initial or pre-initial level, but the arrangement is tailored to make sure that it feels like they're all playing together and they're all making progress that's meaningful for them. And at a primary level, that's really lovely to see, because you just see this positive peer pressure and this kind of mutual encouragement. And, you see the children who are working really hard just to play a single note in time on beat 1. And that's, when they finally get it, the rest of the band really celebrate that. And in the same band, you might have somebody who's working on, 3-note triads on the keys. And when they nail it, everybody's cheering them on. So I think it's about meaningful progress for each individual child, which is really challenging in a whole class setting. And I worked in a whole class setting for quite a long time. But I think it is about recognizing the individual progress and those kind of holistic and musical outcomes for the individuals, but also the kind of social outcomes for the whole group and how they're kind of moving through their learning journey together.
Fantastic, thank you. And you've spoken about some of the challenges there in that whole class setting, and some of you have already touched on ways to tackle this with the fantastic projects you work on. But more widely, I'm wondering, how do you ensure quality within a large classroom setting? How can we roll that out to everyone sat in the audience today across the sector quite widely? You want to take that, David?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking, so the need in Merton is we have a decreasing number of specialist music teachers in schools. So it's ensuring that quality, but also supporting non-specialists to deliver it. And that is a real challenge. And that's where the Mini Musicians Project is at the moment. So we spent 2 years going in delivering with specialists in schools, and we have the data, 1,000 assessments. We know the children made exceptional progress because of that input. But it costs us £250,000. We can't keep, for 10 schools, we can't keep that, that's not sustainable. So what we're trying to do at the moment is how do we embed that in all Merton schools? How do we create that environment? So what we've got is, as a sort of legacy program, we've got a lead practitioner going in and working side by side with class teachers, modelling activities, sharing planning and resources, and then leaving them for the next week to deliver it on their own. And over the course of the year, they're going to step back until the class teacher's delivering it by themselves. Now, that's a really luxurious model that not every borough is going to have, not every local area is going to have. Even with that model, there are challenges. There are teachers nipping out to do their planning or rushing off for an emergency. We have to tackle those, I think, with quite strong personal relationships with the teachers in the classroom. What's helped, though, is the scheme of learning we've devised is it's small steps learning. It's very manageable. It's very accessible. And every lesson is structured in the same way. It's a 4-part structure. We start with some listening, active listening with some movement. We go into singing. We go into the main, which is usually a performing or composing activity. And then we have this fun finish, which is actually a consolidation task wrapped up as a fun activity. So the non-specialists can get their heads around that quite quickly because the structure stays the same, the tasks are manageable, and they're being modelled in our project. We're hoping over time that will embed, but it is a challenge that we face.
Yeah, I think my advice would be just investing as much as possible, and I don't mean necessarily financial investment, but more time into training and teacher training, and just really focusing on what does an engaging lesson look like? How do you actually break it down? How many points of engagement are there within a lesson? How many questions is the teacher asking? How are they kind of building the flow of the energy of the lesson so there's enough room for that peak of excitement, but then there's that reflective listening and learning, and I think it all has to be quite intentional, and that's quite tricky, and especially when you've been teaching for a long time, you forget how much you've actually built and all of the skills that you have, and we've probably got a generation of new teachers coming in to the workforce, and I'm a firm believer of hire for passion, train for skill. But they might not have all of those skills and that knowledge and that experience yet, so kind of investing there and really breaking it down. I mean, we've broken things down to like really observable skills of, have you got the band sat down at the start of the lesson to talk about what you're going to learn today? Because, that might not always be instinctive, so how do you really, I hate the word, but kind of productize that for your teachers so that they're in a really safe, secure environment that they can go in and just focus on the kids in the moment. So I would, definitely encourage as much kind of investment in training teachers as possible.
I don't know how, personally, this is speaking personally, I don't know how teachers go in and teach a whole class trombone or trumpet or something. Oh my word, it's just so honourable. My sonic autism would stress out for a start. But with the iPads, with technology, it is tricky. We ideally work with half classes, and we've been working recently with full classes. And it gets really, you end up with a tangle of headphones at the end. It takes ages to get them all set up. You can troubleshoot the headphones and the splitters because they're working in groups. But one thing I did find is just tell them, just be open. This is going to take time. You're all going to be at different stages. And you've got one, like we said before about that differentiation, you've got one child that's totally ready. They've almost made an album already when someone else has only just made 2 tracks and then they deleted it because they couldn't stand it and starting again. And again, it's that process for everyone. But I think we're just quite open with the kids. We just say, okay, this is going to take ages. Can we all just be as patient as possible? Thank you. And this isn't ideal because we would like a small number. And we usually find they get on board and quite helpful in that sense.
Bridget, do you have anything to add?
I guess just a sort of another perspective from the sort of music theatre world, which is the kind of opportunity with the whole class, and obviously lots of different needs that we have. I think there's two things that make Snappies work really, really well. I mean, probably more than two, but in this context, that we have a music director, conductor, and a drama facilitator director in the class for all the artist-led sessions. And I think just like that's another resource thing, right? It's like all these things are easier if you have the resource and the people and the training. So I think having those kind of like people in the room that can bounce off each other and kind of, manage, and just, from a point of view of crowd management as well, because often we have the same thing that David was just talking about, where, the teachers are meant to be in the space as well, but they'll quite often take the opportunity to nip out. So it's like, okay, how do you manage a class of 30 rambunctious 9-year-olds? Having two people, it's easier with two people than one. And I think the other thing is about the beauty of opera music theatre being that, like, there's all these different points of entry for kids, so it's like we generally do always get them all singing, but they might all not think they want to sing, but there's other ways in the project in terms of making props or acting, movement, directing, stage management, etc. So it's kind of like, I think that's a way of keeping a whole class engaged, is showing kids that there's different ways to make music, and I think that does apply to other genres, not just opera.
That really nicely leads us on to our next question, which is around engaging those who are less engaged, those with lots of additional needs or underprivileged, underrepresented in going into music education, maybe further down the line as they grow up. How do you make sure that you're providing equitable opportunities for the young people that you work with?
So, Mini Musicians, we were working on the Sounds of Intent framework, as I mentioned, and we were working in mainstream primary schools and additionally resourced provision for children with autism and a special school. And what we're really proud of is that every child, it's around 700 children, every child accessed the same scheme of learning. They just accessed it in different ways. And because it was built around the Sounds of Intent right from the start, we were able to put 230 of the children, both in the mainstream and special settings, forward for the Trinity ACMD award. So it's the largest cohort to go forward for that award, and they all come away with a proper certificate.
Could you explain that award for people who don't know?
It's the Trinity Awards and Certificates in Musical Development, and it's an inclusive award, and it's based on looking at what young people can do, looking at the Sounds of Intent framework, which is an inclusive understanding of how young children or children with different needs learn and develop music. So that was a really lovely aspect of the project, but some of it came down to really practical things. So I mentioned we taught them melodica, little keyboard instrument that you blow into. For some of the children in the special school, blowing and playing at the same time wasn't going to be an option. So how can we give them the same access to the learning, but just take that barrier away? And little battery-powered keyboards, and that's what worked in that setting. So it's having the same ambition for every child, but not necessarily the same route to get there.
I think that's massive, isn't it? One of the things that I was really passionate about when I first joined Rocksteady 10 years ago was this concept of a foundation, and we go in and take Rocksteady into environments that you wouldn't normally be able to experience what we do normally. So we've kind of worked on children's cancer wards, we've worked in refugee camps, we've taken music into siblings' days at hospices, and I think half of the access is just sort of asking what the barrier is so that you can understand it and go in and create a positive musical experience. And I think we saw a really great example of that in here earlier, finding ways to reach the unreachable who aren't engaged with music. Just ask them why they're not engaged and see if you can find a slightly different route in for them, because actually I've always found that really a really inspiring part of being a music teacher is, you might be able to get them excited about something they're listening to on the radio, but if you can work back from that and say, oh, actually, if you like Adele, then maybe you should go and listen to Ella Fitzgerald, and if you like that, then you should go listen to this, and sort of working your way back through musical history with them, but starting with meeting them where they're at. I think that's a really key part of engagement, and just, we talk a lot about, being child-centred in music education. I think that's a really important thing, and there's loads of amazing work that I've heard about over the course of these few days that's happening. And I think it is, are the children at the centre of your decision making? And it doesn't mean you have to do exactly what they say all the time, otherwise all the kids would be called the Dunkin' Donuts at Rocksteady in their band. But I think it's about meeting them where they're at, understanding how, what's relevant to them, what they want to learn, and then build from there.
So, I mean, we've kind of skirted around, but is youth voice really that important at primary school level? I know that we had a question yesterday in one of our panels about, well, there's a point at which youth voice, don't adults know better, was kind of the tone, a cynical way of looking at the tone of the question. I think it was kind of inviting people to give a response to it. But, can you empower primary school children to make their own choices at this level in music?
I think you can to a certain extent, for sure, because if you think about the way you teach and the way you would be interacting with the children in the moment, all you're thinking about is, am I engaging these children right here? Are they having an enjoyable, engaging experience? And that is being child-led there, so it's just kind of taking it outside of the classroom and, and trying to listen to that where possible. You can't do what the children want to do 100% of the time, but if you can be steered by what they're talking about, what they care about, and what is making them, what is really connecting for them with music making, I think that's a really powerful place to start in letting child's voice in, however young they are.
Absolutely, and there were some nods at the other end of the panel. Is there anything either of you would like to add?
Agree with everything Rachel was saying. I think another aspect to all that is co-creation, and it's like you're providing a framework for young people and a structure, but within that, their voice is paramount to like what actually gets made, and that's a big part of the Snappy Opera programme, and it sounds like a lot of the other stuff. And I think just one other point about the kind of inclusion for people who maybe aren't as able to engage. We've got a growing program in special schools, and I've just got one anecdote I'd like to share, which is, I think it's about creating that safe space where people feel able to take part, but also it's okay if they don't. And the first project we did in a special school, we had 3 separate residency weeks, and at the end of the 3rd week, there was a kind of performance within the school for the school community, and there was a group of kids who hadn't taken part in any of the workshops throughout these 3 weeks. And they turned up on the final performance day, full costume, joined in front of the group performing, and sang everything. So it's like they had been learning and engaging, but you didn't witness it. So I think it's just like having that sort of, like, you don't know you think someone's not engaging, but you don't actually always know what's going on. So I think just having that open mind to what engagement can look like in different settings.
Just to add with the youth voice and the co-creation, my best job before this one, obviously, was a primary school music coordinator in Tottenham, in North London. It's a fairly deprived part of the borough, and we had that culture that I was talking about because I was a specialist and I invested a lot of time and energy and purpose. We did have that culture, but the thing that my favourite thing that I had all these different clubs. The best thing I think it was a Tuesday and a Friday, I just opened the music room up at lunchtime, and anyone who wanted could just come in and do whatever they wanted to do. And you got all sorts of different things going on. It was a little bit cacophonous, but it's where all the magic moments happened because they owned that space. It was their time to come in, and so much grew from that. And even at year 2, year 3 level, children are coming in and taking ownership of their music. So there's definitely space for that in primary, definitely.
I guess engagement looks different for different pupils, and some pupils might not necessarily have the confidence to show that kind of engagement in the classroom, so those kind of spaces are really important. Cara, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I suppose because we don't have the pressure of curriculum and, other pressures that schools and music leaders and teachers are facing, for us, why would you do it any other way, really? Because that's our job, to try and tune in to what they want and need and to find a path for them, in that sense. So I think with the structure that we're using at the moment, the tools we're using at the moment, there are so many ways in, and it could just be using your voice, and it could just be the joy of hearing your voice reversed and then pitch it up an octave to make it what we call munchkinization, and seeing that face of like, I did that, I can decide my sounds. And again, back to that autonomy, confidence, trauma-informed approach. Like, I agree with you that they do need they need holding. They need to know that the adult is there to hold, like carrying the session. But apart from that, they therefore have that space to bring themselves into it and to hopefully flourish.
Inspiring stuff, thank you. I mean, we could sit here and chat all day, I'm sure, but in the interest of time, I am going to move us on to our final question. What are your top 3 tangible tips for ambitious music making in the primary classroom? And just a warning, I'm afraid the countdown instruments will be back. Sorry in advance. Shall we start from the opposite end this time? Bridget, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'll be more timely this time. So I think my first one is about trying to strive for that balance between specialist-led work with proper support, training and resources for non-specialists, because we need both in primary settings. And the second one is about co-creation, just picking up what everyone's just been saying, giving children a voice as much as possible in their music making. And the third one is about making it fun, the play-based approach. I will always advocate for that.
Wow, the notebooks are out for that as well, so we know that that was planned and scripted. It was perfect.
No
You've had a
instrument.
whole 30 seconds to go. It was too concise, if anything. So, up next, Caro. The clock starts now.
Echoing a bit of what you've said there. So yeah, openness is one of our main values, and that's like being open to what music is and what you think music is, and how music is about transforming sound into music as well, remembering that. Secondly, yes, the joy, the fun. And thirdly, I think self-awareness for those music leaders, those teachers, of what you do know and what you might not know. And that's okay. And like you said about quality, is about accepting what you don't know. So if we accept that a lot of what children are being taught is not what they're listening to, then how do you skill up and find out from them, in that sense, of what music means to them?
Amazing. You keep talking about engagement and the importance of joy, but you're taking all the joy from Amy, who can't play her instrument. So, Rachel, you have an opportunity to break that.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Starting now.
It's so interesting, actually, because there's a lot of synergy about what we're talking about. And, you know, I'd go back to that not forgetting the inspiration piece. You know, half of what I think kids get really excited about is seeing somebody that's really passionate about what they're doing. If you're a real life musician going in to talk to kids about music making, and you still love music making and you're conveying that, I think that is really powerful. So that kind of inspiration piece is my first tip. I think kind of investing as much time as possible into teacher training and remembering that kind of engagement and energy management, you know, how you manage the flow of energy in a lesson to keep the kids engaged. That doesn't just happen. Those are things that you need to give people the tools and skills to be able to do. And then my final one, just to echo you both really, is to keep listening. You know, keep listening to your critics, and the kids will be your biggest critics. Ultimately, they will always tell you what they would like to see differently. So keep listening to how you can improve.
I'm afraid we can't carry on listening.
Yeah, the irony there. Keep listening. Nope, stop listening.
I like energy management. I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, behaviour's a lot harder to manage. I'll talk to you about it afterwards, but energy is easier to manage.
Right, David, maybe an opportunity to talk about energy, talking now.
Well, so my 3 for quality in primary are start early, start well, and be in it for the long term. So your best music making needs to be happening in the nursery, in reception. You need to invest your time and energy, your best planning, your best instruments into those early years, because you can do so much more than you. Starting as a secondary teacher, coming to primary, I learned how much you can teach, how much you can achieve in the nursery. Start early, start well. And then be in it for the long term. 3 years is my rule. If you start early and well in nursery, by the time those children are finishing year 1, the children that were in year 3 of leaving your school, you've transformed the whole school. But you need to be in it for that length of time as a minimum. So start early, start well, be in it for the long term.
Amazing. And with 20 seconds to go, it's amazing to hear. Well, I think the summary from today is engagement and longevity, which I think you've kind of summed up really well there.
Joy.
Joy. Oh, yes, joy. I can't forget joy. It's been a 2-day conference I'm working. We're working towards joy here. So without further ado, a massive thank you to Caro, David, Bridget, and Rachel for sharing their work. It's genuinely really inspiring and great to hear more about it. you've also imparted loads of knowledge, both on Amy and I and on our audience. So thank you very much for insightful discussion. If you haven't yet listened to our podcast, you will find it on, I'm going to get this right, hopefully. Amy's eviling me, just in case I get it wrong. It's musicmark.org.uk/podcast, nice and easy to find. Or you can find it on your all your well-known streaming platforms. I think that's the way I meant to say it. I'm a granddad at heart. So without further ado, another massive round of applause to our panel and to my co-host Amy, and see you after your lunch. Thank you, guys.